Imagine this. A figure, totally revered, someone whose whole life is built on these incredibly strong vows, unshakable principles.
Right, like the absolute bedrock of their existence.
Exactly, and this isn't just someone who made a sacrifice. We're talking renouncing kingdoms, lifelong asceticism, all for what they saw as, well, the ultimate duty.
The peak of commitment.
But then the world around them just spirals into chaos. Grave injustice is happening everywhere. And here's the twist. Their dedication, that rigid sticking to principles, it doesn't stop the disaster. It actually becomes the central problem. It ends up sort of inadvertently fueling massive despair. So what happens when your sacred duty actually leads to catastrophe?
That's a heavy question.
Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we plunge into complex ideas, drawing from some really fascinating sources. We cut through all the noise, the information overload.
To get to the core insights, the surprising facts.
Think of it as your shortcut, basically. Your way to get genuinely well-informed without needing to read stacks of research yourself.
We do the digging for you.
Today, we're diving into an incredibly rich and I think really timely philosophical discussion. It's ancient, but feels so relevant. We're looking at the poignant, really profound final conversation between Pitama Bhishma,
The legendary patriarch.
and Sri Krishna. Our insights today, they're drawn from some powerful excerpts, specifically from Bhishma's dilemma, duty, dharma, and the price of inaction, and also dharma, karma, and the cost of inaction.
Great sources for this topic really get into the meat of it.
Absolutely. And our mission for you today is to unpack these crucial concepts that honestly transcend time. We're talking duty, dharma, that huge, often kind of misunderstood idea of righteousness,
It's much deeper than just rules.
karma, which again is way more than just action. It's about conscious choice, responsibility,
Yeah.
and maybe the most overlooked part,
Yeah.
the devastating cost of inaction.
Yeah. What happens when you don't act?
Exactly. And look, this isn't just some dusty story from an old epic. It's a living testament, really, to how these timeless principles shape our life choices, our impact on society. It offers some incredibly powerful practical lessons, I think, for your own decisions in the complex world we're navigating right now.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's dive in.
So to really get the weight of this dilemma, we first need to understand our central figure, Pitama Bhishma, his name alone.
It just resonates with absolute reverence in the Mahabharata, right? One of the grandest epics ever told.
Oh, absolutely. He's this towering figure, patriarchal, a formidable warrior, someone whose presence just commanded respect, awe even.
Yeah. And in the story, he's often presented as the embodiment of self-sacrifice, of unwavering commitment, the kind of person you'd point to and say, now that's integrity, that's absolute loyalty.
Then that whole perception, that identity, it's built entirely on these profound, almost unbelievable pledges he made. Bhishma's entire life story really is shaped by two monumental vows. They're what earned him the name Bhishma, which means one of a terrible oath.
Terrible in the sense of awesome or formidable.
Formidable, yeah. Intense. The first was just staggering. He renounced his birthright, his claim to the kingdom, the throne of Hastinapur. Gone.
And why?
Purely for his father's happiness. See, his father, King Shantanu, fell deeply in love with Sakyavati, a fisherwoman, but her father had a condition for the marriage. Only her children could inherit the throne.
Ah, okay. So Bhishma, who was then called Devavrata.
Right. He just stepped aside, completely gave up his royal destiny, all to make sure his father could marry the woman he loved without any future succession fights. It was this act of filial devotion, just almost unimaginable.
Wow, and that alone would be huge.
Yeah.
But he didn't stop there, did he?
No, he took it even further, cemented it. Not only did he give up the throne, he also took a lifelong vow of absolute celibacy.
Brahmachari.
Well, that's more than just not marrying, right? It's a deeper spiritual thing, too. It is. In that context, it's a profound commitment, not just celibacy, but dedicating your entire being, your energy, towards a higher purpose. And for Bhishma, the specific goal was to absolutely guarantee that no descendants of his could ever challenge Satyavati's line for the throne.
So he removed himself entirely,
Go.
Personally, politically, genetically.
Totally. It was ironclad, a complete renunciation.
Okay, so from his perspective, these actions were the pinnacle of selflessness.
Unquestionably. Our sources show his conviction. He's quoted saying, "I renounced the kingdom for my father's happiness, took a vow of lifelong celibacy. There was no selfishness in this, Vasudeva." He genuinely believed this.
Vasudeva being Krishna.
Right. Bhishma saw sticking rigidly to these pledges as his supreme duty, never deviating, never even thinking about an alternative even as the world changed around him. He felt he was just following the rules, decisions made by the assembly or just his own sacred vows. The path was set, immutable.
And what's so interesting and maybe relatable is how deeply he believed this. His choices, or maybe more like his lack of independent choice, he saw that as just fulfilling this unbreakable contract.
Yeah, a contract with himself, with the universe maybe. He was the ultimate rule follower, commitment personified. Steadfastness was the virtue for him.
He thought he was acting with total integrity just by holding the line.
And it's that exact commitment, that unwavering loyalty, that ironically puts him right at the center of this massive storm brewing. We're talking about the Mahabharata War, a cataclysmic conflict.
Tearing the whole Kuru lineage apart, ushering in this age of huge suffering.
And it wasn't just a little family squabble over the crown. This was a bitter fight for Hastinapur, escalating fast, marked by just growing injustice, moral decay everywhere, a downward spiral into total chaos.
In Bhishma, despite his wisdom, his power as a warrior, his moral standing, everyone respected him, both sides. He stayed bound by his oaths. He saw his main duty as protecting the royal seat, protecting the lineage.
Regardless of who was actually on the throne, regardless of whether they were righteous or, well, deeply unrighteous.
So he ends up serving the throne. Not necessarily the truth, not what was right in the face of just escalating wickedness. He was a pillar of the dynasty, and his oath meant supporting the current rulers, even when they were clearly disastrously wrong.
And this is where that central irony just smacks you in the face. It's this profound paradox, right? How could this noble figure, so dedicated to duty as he saw it, become a key pillar supporting a conflict that leads to such utter devastation?
It's mind-boggling. How could such dedication lead to destruction?
Exactly. And that question, it isn't just some ancient riddle. It perfectly sets the stage for Sri Krishna's insights, which are revolutionary, really. They completely redefine duty, righteousness, action itself.
It really is the ultimate good intentions, terrible outcomes scenario, which brings us right to Krishna's radical redefining of Dharma and karma. Their conversation, it happens on the battlefield, right? Bhishma is lying there mortally wounded.
Yeah, on a bed of arrows.
Yeah.
A really poignant setting.
And Krishna starts with something that must have just floored Bhishma, this man who prided himself on wisdom, on sticking to the truth. Krishna looks at him, this venerable elder, and says bluntly, "Ignorance is your fault, Your Highness."
Wow. Talk about direct.
Yeah.
A shocking challenge. Krishna basically says Bhishma's biggest flaw was that he failed to even try to know the true form of Dharma.
He didn't even try.
That's Krishna's point. Bhishma saw Dharma as static, rigid, unchanging, like a law carved in stone forever. He saw it as just tradition, something handed down, or a final thought, something already decided, no need to revisit it.
Fixed.
Immutable.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really relevant for us listening now.
Yeah.
Because how often do we do that? In our own lives, cling to these rigid, static ideas of what's right or our duty without really questioning if they still fit, if they're still...
All the time. This is how we've always done it in our family. Or I made a commitment to this company and that's that, even when circumstances have totally changed.
Right. Even when sticking to it starts causing actual harm. Maybe it's a business strategy that worked 5 years ago but is failing now, or a personal belief we adopted ages ago that just doesn't fit reality anymore.
Bhishma's blind spot here. His inability to see Dharma as anything but static, it feels incredibly familiar. It echoes across time.
So what's Krishna's alternative?
Krishna offers this truly dynamic, almost revolutionary definition. He states it so clearly. Dharma is life itself.
Not a rule book, not a doctrine.
No, the very essence of existence, the underlying principle of everything. And because life is dynamic, always moving, Krishna emphasizes life is constantly changing.
Okay.
And then comes the crucial part, the core teaching. Change is the essence of life.
Wow. Okay, so if Dharma is life and life is change, then Dharma itself must be dynamic. It can't be static by definition.
Exactly. And the implication for Bhishma, lying there, it's devastating. Despite time moving on, despite circumstances shifting completely around him, he neither broke his vow nor accepted any change.
His rigid adherence flew directly in the face of Dharma's true nature.
It's like trying to navigate a raging river with a map of a dried-up stream bed. It just doesn't work.
Can you give us an analogy for that?
Sure. Think of Dharma not as a rigid monument like a statue standing against time. Think of it instead as a living river.
Okay.
For that river to be truly alive, to do its job, nurture life, allow travel, Water the fields, it has to adapt. It has to change its course based on the terrain, obstacles, floods, droughts.
Makes sense.
If it just stayed stagnant, stuck in one place, clinging to its old banks even when they crumbled, it wouldn't be a river anymore. It'd become a swamp, maybe even toxic, harming the life it was supposed to support.
So Bhisham's understanding of Dharma was like that stagnant swamp.
That's the idea. Unable to adapt to the living, breathing, changing reality around him, clinging to the old shape even when it no longer served life.
That's a really powerful image. It really clarifies Krishna's point. It's a huge aha moment.
Yeah.
It moves us beyond just blindly following tradition or some fixed idea of right. It suggests something more fluid, more responsive.
More adaptive. Being with life, flowing with its currents, meeting its demands, rather than resisting the inevitable changes.
Okay, so that's Dharma redefined. How does that connect to karma?
Well, from this dynamic view of Dharma, Krishna then radically redefines karma too. A lot of people think karma is just about consequences, right? Good deeds, good results. Bad deeds, bad results. Or maybe even fate.
Yeah, that's the common understanding.
But Krishna elevates it. His definition is active, powerful. Karma means taking decisions and accepting their results.
Taking decisions and accepting results.
Yes. It's not just about doing stuff, being busy. It's about conscious, responsible choice. And actively owning the outcomes, the ripples of those choices. He's emphasizing agency, responsibility.
So it's not just what you do, but the conscious choice behind it and owning the consequences.
Exactly. And this is where Krishna really criticizes Bhishma. He says flat out that Bhishma never truly made any decisions.
Wait, Bhishma, the guy who made these huge life-altering vows, he never made decisions.
That's Krishna's point. He argues Bhishma just remained bound by his pledges. He used them, in Krishna's view, like a shield. Protection against the hard work, the discomfort of making real conscious choices in the moment.
He hid behind the vows.
That's the core of the critique. Krishna accuses him of avoiding the responsibility of making decisions in the name of duty. How often did Bhishma say, it was the assembly's decision, or just fall back on his pre-existing vows?
Right, he deferred responsibility.
He effectively abdicated personal responsibility for the outcomes. He saw himself as just executing his vows, not as an active decision-maker navigating a complex, changing reality.
Which leads to this incredible paradox about real action. Bhisham's life was full of duty, discipline, sacrifice, even fighting in the war.
Huge actions by any normal measure.
Yet Krishna declares he has not performed any real action.
Yeah.
Because he consistently sidestepped true, conscious decision-making. He was active, yes. Busy, yes. But not acting in the deepest, most responsible sense.
He was a participant, maybe, but not a true agent shaping events through conscious choice.
And this really hits home, doesn't it? It makes you ask, are we truly acting if we're just following the rules? Sticking to tradition, avoiding the hard choices that real responsibility requires?
Absolutely. How many of us, maybe at work, hide behind policy or protocol to avoid taking a stand? My hands are tied.
Or in personal life, clinging to beliefs just because they were handed down, even if they don't serve us or others anymore. It's not just ancient philosophy. It's a mirror to our modern lives. And then Krishna drops maybe the biggest bombshell. This idea that Bhisham's renowned selflessness was actually a profound form of selfishness.
Yeah, that's a heavy one. Krishna lays it out. You only thought of your family. You never considered the welfare of the world. Therefore, your action was indeed a form of selfishness.
Wow. How can that be? His vows were for his father, for the family line.
And the sources acknowledge those initial vows were undoubtedly good deeds, born from love, from sacrifice, noble intentions. Bhishma wasn't trying to be malicious.
So where does the selfishness come in?
In Krishna's view, it comes from the rigid, unadaptive adherence to those vows. It became selfish because Bhishma prioritized his personal commitment, his personal sense of integrity based on that static vow.
Over the greater good.
Over the welfare of society. Over intervening when he saw terrible injustice unfolding. He chose the comfort of sticking to his promise over the difficult, messy work of engaging with the suffering and chaos around him.
So it wasn't about bad intent, but about prioritizing his personal vow above the needs of the world.
Exactly. He prioritized keeping his own slate clean, according to his own rigid rules, over preventing widespread harm. It's a fascinating and deeply uncomfortable idea. How duty, when it becomes rigid and unseeing, can morph into a kind of self-serving inaction, the comfort of certainty, even when that certainty is leading everyone off a cliff.
Which brings us to the devastating costs of that inaction. Krishna doesn't mince words here, does he?
Not at all. He lays out the consequences directly. A pervasive failure to prevent injustice, all stemming from Bhishma's static stance, his refusal to adapt.
Yet he lists specific failures. He says Bhishma did not make efforts to stop Dhritarashtra from unrighteousness. Dhritarashtra being the blind king.
Bhishma's nephew, yeah. Who consistently favored his own wicked sons, especially Duryodhana, over the righteous Pandavas, basically paving the way for the whole disaster.
And Bhishma, as the respected elder, the grand uncle, had the moral weight to step in, but didn't.
Then Krishna points out Bhishma failed to deliver justice against Duryodhana's actions and the abuses of the unrighteous. Duryodhana, the main antagonist, just driven by greed, envy, total disregard for Dharma, trying to poison the Pandavas, cheating them out of their kingdom.
And Bhishma largely let it slide.
He didn't actively stop it, but the most critical example, the one everyone remembers.
The humiliation of Draupadi.
Exactly. The wife of the Pandavas, publicly shamed, disrobed in the assembly hall, an unbelievable act of cruelty and dishonor. And Bhishma, he just cited it as the decision of the assembly.
No intervention, no strong condemnation.
He essentially washed his hands of it, hid behind procedure, behind his vow to the throne, which technically belonged to Dhritarashtra and his lineage at that point.
This is so uncomfortable. It forces us to ask, right? Is following orders, is sticking to the rules or tradition ever a valid excuse when it allows terrible injustice to happen? When it facilitates suffering?
It highlights the huge moral burden of passive complicity. Bhishma, with all his power, his wisdom, his respect, he became complicit through inaction, through refusing to step outside the lines he had drawn for himself with his vows. His silence in that hall was just devastating.
And the inevitable result of all this inaction?
The Mahayuddha, the Great War itself. Krishna directly challenges Bhishma's belief that his vows were truly dharmic, truly righteous. He asks him that crushing question. If your vow was truly dharmic, then why would this great war be happening?
Oof, that's hitting him where it hurts. The war itself is the evidence against his rigidly held dharma.
Exactly. Krishna presents the war, the unimaginable suffering, the destruction of lineages, as the direct, unavoidable outcome of Bhishma's unwavering adherence to his vows, his refusal to adapt. His duty didn't prevent the war, it tragically enabled it. It gave moral cover, military strength to the side that was clearly in the wrong.
He propped up the unrighteous regime because of his vow.
Precisely. And here, Krishna delivers this incredibly powerful, maybe even controversial principle, one that challenges our usual ideas about keeping promises.
What is it?
He says, if a vow, which might have once been beneficial, begins to harm the entire society, it becomes imperative to break that vow at that very moment.
Imperative, not optional.
It's a mandate. This completely flips the script on integrity. We usually think integrity means always keeping your word. Krishna says sometimes true integrity means having the courage to break your word for the greater good.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
It definitely challenges you, the listener, to think about your own commitments. Are there rules, promises, traditions in your life that maybe started out fine, but now, if you stick to them rigidly, are they causing harm, blocking progress?
Are there vows you hold that need re-examining? Not because it's convenient, but because the context has changed, and sticking to them is no longer serving the greater good, or maybe even actively hurting it. It's a call for ongoing, dynamic moral evaluation.
Beyond the societal catastrophe, Krishna also points to the personal cost for Bhishma, this idea of bondage of karma.
Yeah, the sources say that despite this life of incredible discipline, sacrifice, perceived duty, a life you'd think would lead to liberation, Krishna tells him he's bound by the bondage of karma. Why? Because he has not performed any real action.
Such a paradox. Ultimate discipline, yet he's bound, not free. So this bondage of karma, it's not like punishment.
Not simply punishment, no. It's more like spiritual stagnation. By avoiding true conscious decision-making, by clinging to those old vows instead of adapting, Bhishma created his own prison. He wasn't trapped by outside forces, but by the very rigidity of his own commitments.
Preventing his soul from true freedom, from purposeful action in a changing world.
Exactly. His life, despite looking like the pinnacle of duty, lacked true karmic fulfillment. It lacked authentic, meaningful action because he refused to engage with the dynamic reality of Dharma and make the hard choices it demanded.
And you can see echoes of that today, can't you? People prioritizing comfort, security, rigid ideologies over taking moral action, over intervening when needed.
Totally. Think of a business leader clinging to an old model because that's how we do it, even as the market collapses.
Right.
Or someone avoiding a tough conversation with a friend or family member saying, it's not my place, while a harmful situation just gets worse.
When we refuse to adapt, choose rigidity over engagement, we don't just harm others, we limit ourselves, we create our own kind of chains. So the conversation then pivots, right, to the dynamic nature of Dharma. That true duty isn't static, it actually calls for change. And this forces a reevaluation of what a true vow even means.
Absolutely. Krishna argues it's not just about the initial intention, however noble. A true vow is defined by its dynamic nature, its adaptability, and crucially, its ongoing impact on society. Its righteousness, its validity depends on staying aligned with the changing nature of Dharma and the welfare of the world.
So what makes a vow true, according to Krishna, contrasting it with Bhisham's?
Well, first, it has to benefit the entire society. Its value comes from serving the collective good, not just fulfilling a personal promise. Second, and this is key, it must be dynamic and adaptable, not static because life changes. Third, there has to be a willingness, even a moral duty, to break it if it starts causing societal harm.
Wow, willingness to break it is part of its truth.
In this framework, yes. And finally, a true vow should facilitate true karma-conscious decision-making, not block it by becoming a shield against responsibility.
This really pushes you to think about your own commitments. How do you define a true vow in your life? Are your deepest principles serving the greater good? Are they flexible enough to adapt? Or are they, maybe, unconsciously, just rigid adherence to something decided long ago that might not fit anymore?
It's not about breaking promises lightly. It's about active, ongoing evaluation of their impact, not just a one-time declaration and then blind adherence forever.
And Krishna is very clear about the mandate to break a vow when necessary.
Unequivocal. He states if a vow, even a good deed initially, begins to harm the entire society, it becomes imperative to break that vow at that very moment. No ifs, ands, or buts. Societal good trumps the individual pledge.
And he tells Bhishma directly, almost sadly, time has changed, but you neither broke your vow nor accepted any change.
Highlighting that vows aren't these immutable contracts set in stone. They have to adapt. If a vow stops serving its good purpose, if it starts causing harm, blocking justice, it must be reevaluated, potentially broken. It takes courage, real moral courage, not weakness.
And if holding on to a vow makes you dodge responsibility, avoid making crucial decisions.
Then it's a flawed vow, by Krishna's definition. It's become a trap, preventing you from doing your real duty, which involves making those necessary, righteous decisions. It becomes a contributor to inaction and harm.
You can see this playing out all the time. Organizations clinging to outdated policies, governments sticking to laws that cause harm, individuals holding on to dogmas even when faced with contrary evidence. It's a call for dynamic moral courage, the guts to say, this isn't working, even if I promised, even if it's ingrained.
Yeah. And this whole redefinition then changes how we see the purpose of action, of karma. It's not just activity, it's conscious engagement with life.
More than just doing something.
Right. The core is still taking decisions and accepting their results, choice and accountability. But also, since change is the essence of life, a key purpose of action is to respond to change, to facilitate necessary transformations. We act not just to maintain, but to evolve.
Man has to do karma for change, as the sources say. Our actions should move things forward.
And a huge part of that is embracing responsibility, especially when it's uncomfortable, when it challenges our commitments or beliefs. That's how we avoid Bhisham's trap of inaction.
And ultimately, the purpose of righteous action seems to be the welfare of the world, preventing harm, upholding justice, serving the greater whole.
That's the strong implication from Krishna's critique, yes. True action is aimed outwards, towards collective well-being.
Which brings us to the end of this conversation and Bhisham's profound realization. The shift in him is palpable, isn't it? Almost heartbreaking.
It really is. He starts with this unexpected humility, saying, "Forgive me, Vasudeva. Today I was unaware of your true form." It's more than just an apology. It feels like a genuine spiritual awakening, a dawning realization of Krishna's wisdom and this crushing regret for misunderstanding Dharma his whole life.
It's like his entire identity, built on that rigid duty, is just shattering. A painful reckoning.
Absolutely. And then he asks so earnestly, "What is my fault, Vasu? Tell me." It's not defiance. It's this desperate need to understand why. why his whole life's path, which felt so right, led to this. It's profound humility from someone so revered, finally seeing his own fallibility.
Watching his worldview crumble and trying to understand the pieces.
And he accepts it. He acknowledges Krishna's wisdom, saying it will surely be useful, even now at the very end. That acceptance, after everything, after seeing the devastation his inaction contributed to, it shows a deep, agonizing grasp of his mistakes, a final, painful understanding of true Dharma.
Which leads to the ultimate consequence, accepting death.
Yeah, Krishna gives him that final, stark challenge, almost an opportunity for one last decisive action. If you cannot decide to fight on the side of the Pandavas, then at least renounce your weapons and accept your death. The time for passive observance is over. A choice is demanded.
And Bhishma, having finally understood,
he embraces it. I accept, Vasu. Your death would be my great fortune. Please end me. He sees dying, especially through the consequences Krishna has shown him, not as defeat, but as liberation, release from the karmic burden of those past choices.
the ultimate price, but also the ultimate freedom for him, perhaps.
And that acceptance powerfully reflects the cost of inaction we've been talking about. His failure to adapt Dharma, his rigid adherence to vows, his avoidance of decisions. It all led him here. His physical death becomes symbolic, a release from the spiritual bondage caused by those unmade choices.
A life ultimately defined by the decisions he didn't make.
Exactly. His fatal flaw, as Krishna laid bare, inability to adapt Dharma, prioritizing personal vows over societal good, failing to prevent injustice, refusing conscious, active decision-making.
The tragic irony is just immense. He sacrificed everything for a vow, believing it was the highest duty.
The peak of integrity, in his mind.
Yet that very vow, clung to so rigidly, became the instrument of his downfall. And worse, a major catalyst for the whole devastating war. His life is this powerful, enduring warning, isn't it? Good intentions, rigid adherence. Without dynamic adaptation, without courageous decision-making, they can lead to catastrophe for everyone.
Stark warning indeed.
So let's try to synthesize this. What does it all mean for us right here, right now? This deep dive into Bhishma and Krishna. It really offers timeless, practical lessons.
Definitely. First, Dharma isn't static. It's alive, dynamic. It demands we adapt to change. It's a river, not a rock.
Second, true karma. It's about courageous decision-making and owning the consequences. Not just following rules or dodging responsibility. It's about conscious choice, agency.
Third, and this one really resonates, inaction has a cost, a devastating cost often, especially when injustice is happening. Standing by silently, that can be as destructive as doing wrong. Bhishma's story screams this.
And finally, true duty demands adaptability. It demands prioritizing the greater good over personal pledges that, no matter how noble they once seemed, are now causing harm. You have to weigh your commitments against their real-world impact, constantly.
Yeah, the impact is key.
So this ancient wisdom, it's incredibly practical for modern life. It really challenges all of us, I think, to look beyond the rigid rules, the comfortable traditions, and ask ourselves honestly.
Are there vows in your life? Personal commitments, professional codes, company policies, deeply held beliefs that maybe started out okay, but now, are they hindering growth? Causing unintended harm? Blocking needed change?
And what does it mean for you to take real action in your world? Is it just staying busy? Or is it making those conscious, maybe difficult decisions, embracing real responsibility instead of passing the buck or just watching from the sidelines?
How can you cultivate a more dynamic sense of duty, one that adapts, embraces change, and always aims for the greater good of your community, your workplace, the world around you?
Maybe the deepest wisdom here, the lesson from Bhishma's tragedy and Krishna's insight, isn't about what we rigidly stick to,
but about our courage to question, to adapt,
and to act decisively when the changing truth of the world demands it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.
So, the final thought to leave you with.
What uncomfortable truth about your own inaction, your own static duty, might this deep dive prompt you to courageously explore?